So Labor Day weekend really was a tale of 3 different tire widths and 3 completely different bicycles for me. The first ride we did on Labor Day weekend was on Friday. Me and Aaron went up to Cleveland. We wanted to ride that new Red Line Greenway, and we also wanted to check out a pizza shop, so we parked at the pizza shop, and then Aaron had planned an 11-mile loop. I rode my 1983 Trek 500. It's a bike that I've upgraded with 9-speed Shimano 105. I also downsized the wheel set from the 27-inch American wheels to 700C, which gives you a little more clearance, so I'm running 32 millimeter tires. Some people get confused when I say that. I'm not talking about 27.5, which is 650B. It's just American road bikes. A lot of them used to come with what were called 27-inch wheels, which are actually, like I said, slightly bigger than 700C. When we got up to Cleveland and got out of the car, I heard this roaring noise, and I knew right away what it was, that it was some kind of fighter jet. The air show is in Cleveland over Labor Day weekend. I'd kind of forgot about it, but the whole time we were riding, the Blue Angels were practicing and flying around. You might see some of the contrails in the background. Trying to capture them with the GoPro is pointless with such a wide angle, but it was really kind of cool. I really like that kind of thing, even though I know in the rest of the world, when you hear those noises, it means someone has bought American weapons, or they're American weapons that are going to be ringing death and destruction on you. So it's a real split emotion when you see something like that. But on this day, it made for a pretty cool backdrop to our ride on this newish bike trail that we had not been on yet. So I have not been on any of my road bikes all year, and I barely rode any of them last year either. So a couple years of almost no road bikes. This bike, Trek kind of marketed as falling between their touring and actual race bike line. I think they call it like a sports bike or a sports tour or something like that. So it's not the most tucked bike by any means, but at the same time, it is so much more road-like than my gravel bike. And I mean that with shorter stays, so it just feels like it starts moving a lot quicker, and then the front end just handles much twitchier and much quicker, and I'm so not used to that anymore. So it does feel like you have to manage the bike some more, but it also gives it that really quick and lively feel. I've gotten so used to my gravel bike, and I remember when I first started riding gravel bikes, I had only been riding vintage road bikes for a number of years, and I actually felt like it felt really slow and sluggish, and like it was unresponsive. But since we ride more and more off-road, I've really started to like that feeling because it's very stable, very easy to ride with no hands. If you bomb down some gravel descents, you don't have to worry about the front end getting that deflected or anything like that. So it's just a really interesting experience. The other thing I really liked is I have toe straps from Fixation on this bike, and when you're climbing or just trying to push the pedals a little bit, I really always like those. I just don't use them on the other bikes because I don't want to have to try and bail out if we're doing some off-road type stuff. They are something I might consider throwing on a bike, though, if we were doing a road tour and I was taking my ATV or gravel bike. This made me kind of think of it. Here, me and Aaron are waiting for the drawbridge to go up. There was a Cleveland Cliffs ship coming through, so a steel boat, which is kind of cool. You forget how down in the flats there are so many cool drawbridges and stuff like that in Cleveland. And then there's also a bunch of new construction. I didn't know that was going on down here, so it looks like they're really redeveloping the flats. So back to the bike. The other thing is I'm so used to not worrying about the terrain at all. And again, you could ride these. I've ridden this bike over every kind of thing. I just forgot that even when you're riding on like those rougher roads and stuff like that, you just have to pay way more attention. Not that I just ram my bikes over stuff unnecessarily, but our streets in Akron and Cleveland and Northeast Ohio could be rough in a lot of places. This bridge that we're going over here is pretty cool. It's I don't know if you call it a drawbridge, but instead of going up and down, it swings parallel to the river to let the boats go by. It had been getting repaired for years and years and was way behind schedule, so that's one of the first times I've ridden over it. The route down to the lakefront was where we're heading, and it's actually much better now. We missed the path there. I thought Erin was pointing at something for me to look at. She was pointing that we should be turning, and I almost ran right into her. So I really dig the look of my vintage road bikes. I mean, I bought this Trek because it was one of the last ones that used that old logo. I know they brought it back for some of their touring bikes, actually in the exact same color as this bike, which I was like, when I first saw that, I was kind of bummed because I have the original, but whatever. But yeah, I just don't think I will be grabbing them all that often anymore. I just really do enjoy grabbing the gravel bike and know that I'm not limited in anything I am going to be doing. Here we're waiting for another drawbridge. This takes you over to Whiskey Island and the old Coast Guard station area. It's actually, I think pretty much everybody hates it because you have to cross this very narrow walk. If you go over the road part of the bridge, there's a fence on the other side that doesn't allow you to get on the trail where the bridge crosses. So, there's all kinds of walk your bike signs, and you pretty much do need to if anyone's around. I mean, it's so great they put in this bridge. You'll see after we go out towards Edgewater, and it's kind of a long ride out that way, which is nice, but you used to have to go all the way around to get there. So this makes this part of the lakefront much more accessible. Right there to the left, you're able to see the old Coast Guard station, which is one of my favorite places anywhere. It's actually where we rode out to watch the total solar eclipse in the spring, but it looks like they're doing some construction, and so unfortunately it was closed and we didn't get to go out there. You could see in the background the Blue Angels were actually landing when we were standing there, though, so we did stand there for a while, and it was kind of cool to see them come across. In Cleveland, the airport where the air show takes place at is right on the lake on the other side of downtown from where we are. So now we're heading out to the Edgewater area. So Aaron had also planned this route so it would have some miles and stuff that we hadn't ridden before besides the Red Line Greenway. Even with this bike's 32 millimeter tires, it does ride pretty smooth. Obviously a vintage steel bike, double butted tubing. It's 501 Reynolds. It's not the more expensive Reynolds, but it still is a bike with pretty nice ride quality. I actually took this group set off a 2007 Trek 1500 SLR. That bike was aluminum with a carbon wrapped fork, and it only cleared 28 millimeter tires. I enjoyed riding it for a little while, just kind of, really that, even though it's an entry-level road bike, it really felt fast to me because I don't really ride anything like that. And just that stiffness when you were climbing just felt nice. It just felt like all your power was going through the bicycle. The thing is, it just really was a rough ride. So when I do longer rides on it, it just kind of beat me up. And the older I get, and with if you followed the channel for a while, I've had some back issues. I just didn't feel like being in a slam position or just getting I think it was more than the slam position. It was just how rough it was, because I've since built up a vintage steel road bike that is a little more slammed, and it's just a much more comfortable bike. So even on the same 28 millimeter tires. So definitely, I think the difference between 28 to 32s is big. And I don't care what anybody says about vertical compliance and frame materials. A steel bike just feels so much more compliant than an aluminum bike. And no one's going to change my mind on that. I have watched some videos on how bottom bracket sway and stuff like that does give the feeling of compliance. So that must be where it comes from. A lot of people commented on my last video that I titled being about ATVs, but it was just music and riding around on ATVs and gravel bikes that, hey, I could ride this on my bike on 28s and all that. Yeah, you can. I actually used to do off-road riding on bikes like this. When I first started riding, I was riding a Viscount and an old Peugeot, and got 32s onto the Peugeot and stuff like that. And I was like, this is fine on gravel. And on smoothish gravel, it is fine, but we ride some really rough stuff. And one, you're going to bend up those old rims, those spokes, all that kind of stuff. And it's just not comfortable. So, and if you're not comfortable, you're also going slower. There's this whole idea that a lot of people have that you should try and get away with the smallest tires you can. I don't understand that. It's not faster. It's not more comfortable. Even on the road, it's been proven that wider tires are faster. So, and then a lot of people have commented about mountain bike tires and how draggy they are. I don't think a lot of people have tried more modern gravel tires, which even with knobs can be pretty quick. I really think the Rene Herse, and I know people say the same thing about the Ultra Dynamicos, and there's a bunch of other tires you guys have brought up, and my friends like Ben here are riding that just roll really well on pavement, but then have that traction for going off-road. So speaking of which, I am riding on this bike, my Raleigh Tamland 2, which I consider just my normal drop bar gravel bike. I have 44s in the back, which are knobby Rene Herse, and then I have a 42 in the front. My friend E sold me really cheap a ultralight Rene Herse, I surprisingly have not had any issues with it, which really blows my mind. But again, the reason I chose this bike for this ride is we didn't have any plans. We ended up riding out to Magic City. Then on the way back, we're like, hey, let's take this old abandoned train line cut. So then I had a bike that was capable for doing it all. And some of that was really rough stuff. And I used to always have to get my wheels trued on my vintage bikes. A lot of flats, pinch flats and all that stuff like that. Super rare to get that on my tubeless setup gravel bike. Again, like people are saying, you could ride that on anything. I used to ride some of this old railroad gravel on those bikes, and it was cool at first because we were just discovering all that stuff, so I was enjoying discovering it. But now it's just pointless, and it's really uncomfortable. A couple other people also mentioned, riding wider slicks, which I think is great. The difference here is the reason I like to have the knobbies is since we're riding some stuff that's not mountain bike trails, we're able to ride when it is wet outside because these are just, rat cuts and all that kind of thing. So we do ride a little bit in the mud and slick, so I like the knobs for that. They also give you some, puncture protection more than slicks would, so it just got the tire elevated a little bit. The next ride we did this weekend was heading out to mountain bike trails we had never been to. You can see here Lake Milton State Park. If you're in the Northeast Ohio area, you probably know this lake even if you don't know it by name, because if you're driving 76 to Youngstown, it's the big lake you cross. So anyone heading out that direction to PA or New York, you end up crossing over this lake. I, in my life, have never stopped here. So there's 10 miles of trails, so we decided let's go out here and spend the day. It was pretty cool trails. They kind of, old school hand-built ones that wind all around, but they weren't super rooty or rocky. There's definitely roots and rocks, but I felt fine on the hardtail. So this is my gunner, and I'm riding with sweet bars. These are the Velo Orange granola bars, and I'm riding Rene Herse 55 millimeter knobbies on this. You could get away with riding a gravel bike out here on skinnier tires, but some of the roots and rock sections would be a little bit of a rough go. I think the perfect bike out here would be something like Aaron had, which, front suspension, Salsa Timberjack. She's just added a little bit of sweep on her bike. Ben was riding his Electric Queen, and really, they were pretty fun trails. They were worth coming out and making a day out of it. Creek crossings, and they did have features in certain spots, but almost all the features were fully rideable, even on rigid bikes. My Strava will be linked below. I can't remember the total elevation. It isn't crazy. There's no huge descents or huge climbs, but it is just a lot of little up and downs at this trail. Being that I film by, using a mouth mount and just turning my GoPro on when I want to, I'm not using like a chest mount and recording the whole ride. I tend to miss stuff because when I don't know a trail, I don't know when I need to be recording. But there were some sections here that I didn't catch that are pretty fast and flowy. So there are some sections where you could really get some speed and get moving. Really, I think the only time I put my foot down on these trails were the two creek crossings you saw, the one right there and the one previously. But if you knew the trail a little better, you would definitely be able to get up those. And we were saying that was the case with a lot of this stuff. You'd get up some speed, but if you didn't know the trail, you didn't know what was coming around the corner. So this would be a place that would become more fun the more you rode it. And you could really pedal and get some speed and get moving and enjoy it if you knew what you were doing here. Or if you're just a better mountain biker than I am. I'm a very, very average mountain biker, average at best. So it's been interesting to me since I did build up the gunner. I've just switched the tires not too long ago to the endurance casing Rene Herse. You could tell they're not quite as supple, but they just hold up so much better because I really do run this bike over the rough stuff. I try to take this instead of the rally when I know we're going to be hitting stuff like you saw on the last ride, but that one, it was a limited amount of that stuff. So they've really held up. I've had absolutely no issues with them, where the other the standard casing Rene Herse. I gashed the sidewalls a number of times. I ended up running it with tubes because I had really just messed up the tires over time. So I think it's a worthwhile trade-off on a bike like this, but on my gravel bike, I don't mind having the extra light and standard casing tires. I also ride the gravel bike like it's an endurance road bike. As I've mentioned, I ride it almost all the time. But even this bike, if you've seen my other videos, I rode this bike on all pavement up to Ann Arbor for a gravel event. So I did 220 miles on my sweet bars and 55s and knobby tires. And, I was riding alone, so it was all about my own pace. But it really it just doesn't feel that slow. I just think, as life goes on, I used to always be one of the skinny tire guys, like I mentioned, the vintage bikes, but it's worth broadening your horizon and changing your perspectives. Things change over time. Supple tires and tread patterns have changed a lot. It's like when I made a video about waxing chains, there were a lot of people who commented yeah, we did that back in the 70s with paraffin wax. It doesn't really work that well. It's like, Silca is not selling you paraffin wax. Things change, I remember when my buddy Woody first said he was riding a trainer in the winter. I'm like, a trainer? I ride bikes to have fun. Why would I ever do that? And then I ended up getting a smart trainer, and for a couple winters there that were really bad, I enjoyed being able to go out and ride with people from all over the world virtually. And, it was something I didn't dislike that much. So keep an open mind if you can. Anyways, after the mountain biking, we went and got dinner in the little town of Lake Milton. There's a brewery there, but it wasn't open on Sunday, so we just went to a little bar restaurant here, Grand View Inn, I believe it was. And then we went over to the beach, which again, had no idea about. I assume there had to be one on this lake, but it was a really nice beach. Water felt really, really clean. It's actually a dammed up river, so it's moving. You felt refreshed when you got out of it. And so it was really warm on this day. And so it was great, maybe last swim of the summer, because the temperature then plummeted overnight. And I think the high the next day was just in the very low 70s. So definitely a worthwhile trip out here. Make a day out of it. This is getting ready for our last ride, the Labor Day ride. I was showing off my garden a little bit, my sunflowers, how well my rose bush did, and some wildflowers that are coming up. I kind of made this little area here over time to keep the cars from pulling up so close. I also like it when I take my bike out that it's not completely visible and accessible. So if I run back in for stuff, not that I'm worried about crime around here, but it is kind of nice to have my own little space there. So again, for this ride, I went and grabbed the gravel bike because we had no plans. We just started riding. So it's that's the thing I love about it. Like I mentioned, I'm just not limited in where I'm going to go. And we decided to hit this industrial gravel through downtown along these abandoned tracks. Well, the tracks are active on the other side, but there would have been tracks here at one point too. So again, I've ridden this on every kind of bike I've owned, but it's just so much more fun to ride it on my gravel bike. So much less effort or more speed if that's what you're going for. Way more comfort, way less, like I said, micromanaging the handling on the bike. It just stays true. You could ride this stuff no-handed with this kind of gravel bike I have here, the slacker style geometry. So we ended up hitting the gravel, then taking the Freedom Trail out to Kent. Again, right there where we're going really fast, there's a bunch of root cracks in the trail. Being on the gravel bike, just sail right over them. Being on my old road bikes, I was worried I was going to break something. We went out to Bentry, one of the few places that was open on Labor Day. So got some coffees and macchiatos. And then again, on the way back, instead of sticking to the trail, decided to take these little unofficial cuts through the woods. So yeah, 4 rides, 3 different bikes over Labor Day weekend. Again, a reminder that for me that it's just really, I love tinkering with bikes. I like having a bunch of bikes. I like doing stuff with the vintage mountain bikes. But when it comes down to it, my reasonably modern gravel bike, it's a 2014, and my ATV are just my favorite things. So please subscribe to the channel, and happy fall, everybody.